Welcome to Symmetry Mind, the dark and fascinating history of psychiatry. I am Dr. Lucid, an avatar backed by the expertise of a board-certified specialist in psychiatry and psychotherapy, as well as a geriatric psychiatrist, bringing you a deep dive into one of the most controversial and misunderstood aspects of human history, the treatment of mental illness throughout the ages. Today, we uncover the dark past of psychiatry, the bizarre and sometimes cruel methods used to treat mental disorders, and how mentally ill individuals were once feared, persecuted, and even executed as witches. Mental illness in the ancient world, possession or disease. Throughout history, societies have struggled to understand the behaviors and emotions that today we recognize as symptoms of mental illness. In ancient civilizations, mental disturbances were often linked to supernatural forces. Many cultures believed that madness was a form of divine punishment, demonic possession, or spiritual affliction. Rather than treating these conditions as medical problems, early societies resorted to religious and supernatural interventions, which often did more harm than good. In ancient Mesopotamia and Egypt, individuals suffering from hallucinations, severe mood swings, or erratic behaviors were thought to be possessed by evil spirits. Priests and shamans were tasked with expelling these entities through exorcisms, spells, or incantations. Sometimes, bizarre rituals such as trephination, where a hole was drilled into the skull to release the supposed demon, were performed. While some survived the procedure, many suffered infections or died from blood loss. In ancient Greece and Rome, mental illness was understood through the lens of humoral theory developed by Hippocrates and later expanded by Galen. This theory suggested that the body was governed by four fluids: blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile. An imbalance in these humors was believed to cause not only physical illness, but also mental disturbances. For example, melancholia, what we now call depression, was associated with an excess of black bile, while mania was attributed to an excess of yellow bile. Treatments included dietary changes, bloodletting, herbal remedies, and even purging. In ancient China, mental disorders were linked to an imbalance in qi, life energy, and the yin and yang. Treatments included herbal medicine, acupuncture, and meditation, but those with severe symptoms were sometimes chained or abandoned. While some of these ancient approaches contained elements of medical wisdom, mental illness remained deeply stigmatized, often leading to isolation and mistreatment rather than compassionate care. The Middle Ages, madness, witchcraft, and religious persecution. As Christianity spread throughout Europe, mental illness took on a more sinister interpretation. The prevailing belief was that madness resulted from demonic possession, sinful behavior, or a curse. Instead of being treated with medical care, those who suffered from psychosis, epilepsy, or extreme emotional distress were often feared, punished, or executed. During the 15th to 18th centuries, mental illness became intertwined with witchcraft accusations. Many individuals, particularly women, who exhibited symptoms of hallucinations, paranoia, or mood instability, were accused of being witches. The infamous Malleus Maleficarum, a witch-hunting manual published in 1487, instructed authorities on how to identify and punish witches, many of whom were simply suffering from conditions like schizophrenia or bipolar disorder. Those accused faced horrific fates. Women who spoke unintelligibly due to psychosis were believed to be casting spells. Individuals experiencing catatonic states were thought to have undergone transformations by dark magic. The punishment for witchcraft was often burning at the stake, drowning, or execution. Those who survived were frequently jailed, tortured, or forced into exile. This period of history highlights the extreme misunderstanding and fear surrounding mental illness. Instead of treatment, Mentally ill individuals were demonized and persecuted, and this stigma persisted for centuries, preventing many from seeking help. By the 17th and 18th centuries, mental illness was beginning to be viewed as a medical condition rather than a supernatural curse. This shift led to the establishment of asylums, institutions designed to house the mentally ill. However, rather than being places of treatment, most asylums functioned as prisons where patients were subjected to inhumane conditions. One of the most notorious asylums was Bethlem Royal Hospital in London, known as Bedlam, where patients were chained to walls, beaten, or subjected to public humiliation. Wealthy citizens would pay admission fees to watch the lunatics for entertainment, reinforcing the dehumanization of the mentally ill. Other asylums across France, America, and Italy followed similar practices, where treatments included bloodletting to remove the bad humors responsible for insanity, ice baths to shock patients back to their senses, restraints and solitary confinement for those deemed uncontrollable. Some physicians, like Philippe Pinel in France, began advocating for moral treatment, emphasizing compassion, structured routines, and humane care. However, these efforts were slow to take hold, and for many, asylums remained places of suffering rather than healing. The 20th century, lobotomies, electroshock therapy, and insulin coma therapy. The 20th century marked significant advancements in psychiatry, but not all treatments were ethical. One of the most infamous procedures was the lobotomy, developed by Dr. Antonio Egas Moniz in the 1930s. It involved severing connections in the prefrontal cortex to cure schizophrenia, depression, and other disorders. Patients often lost cognitive function, emotions, and even their personalities. Dr. Walter Freeman popularized the ice pick lobotomy, performing thousands of procedures, sometimes in mere minutes, without anesthesia. Another widespread treatment was electroconvulsive therapy, ECT, first used in the 1930s. Before ECT, doctors attempted to induce seizures using insulin in what was known as insulin coma therapy. Patients were given large doses of insulin, leading to severe hypoglycemia and convulsions, believed to reset the brain. ECT later replaced this method, but early versions were performed without anesthesia, causing extreme pain and broken bones due to violent convulsions. Despite its brutal past, modern ECT is safe, controlled, and highly effective, particularly for severe depression and bipolar disorder. What about psychiatry today? Thankfully, modern psychiatry has moved away from barbaric treatments and now focuses on scientific research, medication, and therapy. The discovery of antidepressants, antipsychotics, and mood stabilizers in the 1950s and 60s revolutionized mental health treatment, allowing many to live fulfilling lives outside institutions. Despite these advancements, stigma still exists, preventing many from seeking help. But history shows us that mental illness is not weakness, and treatment works. We must continue advocating for understanding, compassion, and accessible mental health care for all. Subscribe to Symmetra Mind for more deep dives into psychology, history, and mental health. I am Dr. Lucid, bringing you the untold stories of the mind, backed by real psychiatric expertise.